Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus, shall we? All right, really quick before we jump into this, I just kind of want to address the word cryptozoology or cryptid. I think it's gotten lost. So many people are just, because of TikTok and other apps, are exploding onto the scene, which is amazing. But, you know, they view just Dogman, Bigfoot, Crawler, Nessie, and Jersey Devil as cryptids, which they are. But there is a broader definition of that word. A thylacine. A thylacine is technically a cryptid because it did exist at one point, and there are people who believe it still does. I do, and I know many people do. I believe it's been proven. There's one that some photos have been taken of it. But cryptids are animals that cryptozoologists or anyone believe may exist somewhere in the wild, but whose present existence is disputed by science. Cryptozoology is a pseudoscience which primarily looks at anecdotal stories and other claims rejected by the scientific community. There was a point in time where chimpanzees and gorillas were a cryptid. The villagers that lived in the area where these beasts, and they were beasts and they still are beasts, existed, only knew of them. They were tall tales and wild tales elsewhere. So this video that you are going to see technically is a cryptid because you can't identify it. And the word has gotten lost. And I only blame TikTok and other just money grabbing apps and channels and people. Because cryptozoology, to me, is something that I do love, and I know many of you guys do as well. Let's get into it.
You're looking at that little black spot in the middle. Wait for it to move. It slinks over some rocks. The original poster said this was in Phoenix Mountain Preserve near Cave Creek Road in Peoria. They had one question. What is this thing? Comments on Reddit went from house cat to jaguar to chupacabra to, well, of course, it went to aliens eventually. We showed the video to a team from Arizona Game and Fish and Southwest Wildlife Conservation Center.
That's pretty far. It looks pretty far away.
I don't think it's a domestic cat, but
You don't think it's a cat?
not a domestic cat.
They were just as baffled as everyone else. In the end, it was easier to figure out what this thing is not.
It's clearly not a mountain lion or a bobcat. We have ocelots, rarely. It's not an ocelot, they're a spotted cat. And then bobcats, which are spotted.
It's probably not a bear, not with a tail like that. Jaguars, we've only ever seen a handful of them over 30 years, and all of them are down by the Mexican border. This is in the middle of Phoenix.
Today's first terrifying experience. So, I've been seeing this girl for close to a month now, and things are going very well between us. We're both into conspiracies, paranormal stuff, spirituality, all of the weird and interesting stuff. When we're together, things tend to be more eventful than usual, like signs from the universe reaching out and lots of synchronicity. For example, she goes to church, and I went with her for the first time last Sunday. The pastor directly spoke to us at the beginning of his sermon and said it was basically for us, and proceeded to talk about some of the things we were talking about on the way up there, as well as some more things that were relevant to our past. It was a rather large church as well, so I'm sure I wasn't the only unfamiliar face. She shops at some organic food stands and stuff, and when I've gone with her, the vendors end up talking to us about things we literally had just finished talking about. Many examples of us talking about stuff, and then we either see it or somehow becomes relevant very soon afterward. There's also been some minor paranormal stuff happening around our living space, some of which I've noticed as well. Just a minor example that happened to me instead of her. I was rearranging a stack of egg cartons she wanted to recycle on her windowsill, and I knocked a teacup into the sill. I fixed it, walked away, and noticed not 5 minutes later it was back to being knocked over in the same position. Minor stuff like that, but it's happened enough times to seem beyond coincidence. She lives in a very, very small town in central Florida, and I stay over sometimes. Just a couple of days ago, we were going on a small hike after we both got off of work, like 15 minutes down the road or so, probably 3 miles long altogether. Funny enough, the topic of skinwalkers got brought up just before we had left. We got onto the trail and everything's normal, and the only thing of note is towards the start of the trail I spot a coral snake and stop her and her dog from stepping on it. For those who don't know, coral snakes are very venomous and rather rare as far as I know. I don't really like snakes, but she doesn't mind them, so I got an all-familiar minor heebie-jeebie bit after spotting it. But we continued on. At the center point of the trail, there's this long bridge that goes to an overlook of the lake, so we stopped there for a minute to take the view in. It's around sunset, so it's nice. We're just taking it all in for a bit. I didn't even think about it, but after talking about it with a friend, I did hear a strange, high-pitched sort of noise a few times in the minutes before we had left. She works with various animals and has for 3 years, but neither of us could recognize what the sound was, although she had only recently moved to Florida, so who knows if it's relevant or not. Anyway, we start to head down the bridge as it's going to be dark soon. As we get to the end of the bridge, her dog just takes off as if it's chasing something, although there is clearly nothing in front of him, and I can see a good way down the trail. I get a really, really bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. The dog takes a sharp right into the woods. As soon as he takes that turn, a deer bounds out of the woods from the left, opposite of where he ran, stops maybe 30 feet in front of us on the trail. She and I are calling for her dog to come back to us. The deer just stands there watching us. There's this super loud machine noise that keeps crescendoing up and down. I'm pretty certain it was an airboat, but it's adding to some pretty spooky vibes already. The night is quickly falling, and the deer remains on the trail watching us as we call for the dog. It kind of creeps my girlfriend out, and she eventually yells at it to go away after 5 or 7 minutes. It bounds away into the woods like 20 feet and stops to watch us some more. We go off the trail a bit and try to call her dog. The deer finally runs off for good and is followed by a small pack of deer when it finally does. It's definitely dark out now, and we head back to the trail in case her dog has circled around, so neither of us nor her dog gets lost. We actually get to the trail at the same time her dog does. Keep in mind, we've been calling him this whole time. He ends up limping back to the trail. He doesn't seem to respond to our calls. He's been gone 20 minutes, the longest she has ever seen him run off for, and is definitely messed up. He's panting like crazy. His neck is covered in saliva. He's limping from his back leg, whose paw is curled, and his gaze is not there. Like, when you look at him directly, you can tell he's not really seeing you, even if his eyes seem to be looking in your direction. Again, it's completely dark by now, and he obviously needs a vet. So I pick him up and we haul ass 1.5 miles or so back to the car. We're half running in short bursts by her phone flashlight, so we don't step on any snakes, and almost the whole way back we keep hearing this loud rustling in the woods/field we pass through. At least a boar-sized animal was out there. I couldn't think of anything else in Florida that could make that much noise, which definitely added to the fear. The machine noise is also still blaring its slow crescendo, legit feel like a scene out of a horror movie. To make a long story short, her dog is definitely bit by a snake, like a coral snake. From a blood test he received, we drive 2.5 hours away at 11 p.m. to get anti-venom from the University of Florida, but he ended up being okay, and we picked him up the next day after. The whole situation felt very off in a weird way. I thought it was quite strange that the deer would stop on the trail to watch us like that. There were tons of hunting blinds throughout the area as well, so I can't imagine the deer would be too friendly in that area. The dog was not chasing anything that I could see, and again the trail was definitely clear for a long way. He took that very sharp right and went right into the woods. It was almost like something was calling him, saying, "Come on, come this way," and led him to the snake. Immediately after he ran into the woods is when that deer came. And just before all this occurred, we heard some strange, slightly high-pitched mammal-sounding animal out there in the marshes. Not to mention that loud rustling that we heard when we were rushing out of there. The loud machine noise obviously isn't related, but definitely made the vibes more creepy. I don't know for sure if this was some sort of cryptid, but based on how many things we talk about end up happening to us soon after, I don't know. There were a lot of weird aspects to this experience, for sure. Today's second encounter. First of all, growing up, I've dealt with paranormal things like shadow people, things moving without anyone touching them, and I swear this is legit. A year ago, or so, back in 2020, my parents were going on their annual trip to Florida with my 3 brothers for the week. My mother asked me if I could go by their house and feed the family dogs, or stay and house sit. Being a good daughter that I am, I told my mom that I'd just stay at the house and save on gas. Throughout the week at night, I would bring the 2 dogs inside to feel safer, since my parents live in the somewhat back road. Keep in mind, my parents' house is surrounded by trees, and there is a thick tree line separating their house from the 2 neighbors. Well, one night, while I was in the house alone, I called my best friend Bailey to come over and stay the night. We were going to do what 2 middle-aged 20-year-old females do when alone: play video games, watch movies, TikTok, and drink a little. Well, Bailey and I were in the kitchen at around 3 or 4 in the morning making homemade funnel cakes. Like the fat asses we were, the dogs kept moving around and staring at the glass kitchen door that led off the back porch. I asked Bailey to let them out so they could chill and we'd have enough leg room to keep cooking. While we're eating our funnel cakes, we came across a TikTok about homemade temporary tattoos with a printed picture and perfume. Keep in mind, my parents have about 3.5 acres of land, so there is a family house, my father's 2-car garage, workshop, and a large pole barn. Those 2 buildings are rather far out near the tree line, so Bailey and I walk down to the workshop and go to my parents' work office. I punch the code into the garage door. We go inside to the computer and start printing out pictures of Kylo Ren and try to make a temporary tattoo for each other. Before I go any further, a little side note: my parents have a security camera all around their property, and inside the office is a television above the desk showing all of the live footage from the cameras. So, while I was cutting out temporary tattoo for Bailey, she says, "What is that?" I stop cutting and look into the cameras.
At first I didn't see anything except a small figure in front of the pole barn. It looked like it was sniffing at the garage door. I shrugged it off and told Bailey it's probably one of the many stray dogs that roam around here. Bailey nudged my arm quickly after I said that and pointed to the screen again. Wanting to prove to her it was a stray dog, I stood up and looked closer at the screen. And when I did, I saw the figure, but it did not look like one of the stray dogs. The creature was hunched over on all fours. Its arms were super thin and long, but pointed outwards from its chest. Kinda how you'd imagine that Exorcist girl when she crawled on all fours. It had no fur, its skin looked tight on its body. And when I told you, my inner bitch went to open the door and look at it, Bailey stopped me right there. When I grabbed the lock on the door, looking back at the screen at this creature, it looked like it would scratch the door of the pole barn. I immediately said, "WTF is that?" And the creature turned its head straight to the camera, like it knew it was on scene. When its head turned, I couldn't make out clear facial features, but it looked like it had a human head and two glowing big eyes. Bailey and I screamed, and it bolted. It bolted off the screen. Clearly freaked out, Bailey and I hugged each other. Then the sound of smashing against the garage door. Not once, but twice. Like, you know what it sounds like when someone smacks the garage door from the outside with their hand? Yeah, just like that. I called my grandmother and told her we thought we saw something and to stay on the phone with us until we got back to the house. Once we were in the house, we brought the dogs in, locked every single door, and took shots of Crown until we fell asleep. Now, we had talked about this a few more times, and I have no idea what this creature was. And I think I saw it again. Anyway, a few months back, I was leaving my parents' house at around 11:30 on a Friday night when I approached my car that I parked in the front of their garage this time. When I went to grab my keys from my little backpack, when that strange urge to look up at the tree line that surrounded my parents' property, I kind of just figured it was my anxiety acting up because I'm not a fan of the dark. But I looked up to ease my mind that all I was going to see was some trees. I was very mistaken. When I looked up, I saw something in the tree line squatting down. Its skin looked gray, its body and limbs skinny, no eyes. It seemed like it had dark eyes. It tilted its head from side to side like it was staring at me. It was crouched down, kind of like Spider-Man sits on the edge of the building or a lamppost. My heart literally felt like it was out of my ass. I just immediately unlocked my car, saying, "Nope, nope, nope, F that." Got inside my car, locked the doors, called my boyfriend, who didn't answer, then I called my friend Leah, who answered, and asked why I was laughing hysterically. So I literally sped out of there while on the phone with her. My brothers have told me they've seen some strange things in the tree line before, and even at the end of the driveway near the mailbox. Now my parents have a few cameras for the shop at the end of the property, and when I go back over there, I'm going to go through the footage and see if anything's there. Also, my parents live on an Indian burial ground, so that's helpful to this situation, I guess. And today's third encounter. I went fishing on a Sunday afternoon in late spring of 2016, way out in the sticks, in a mountain valley in Boonville County, Idaho. A bridge on a gravel road had washed out, but the old dirt bike trail crossed over the riverbed just fine. The plan was to find a trailhead to a pretty remote lake and head up there for some trout fishing. When I finally found the trail, it ran off the gravel road for a bit before it ended in the river, so the lake was a no-go. I figured I might as well try the river. I waded across the river, left my dirt bike up on the bank under some trees. I stay out there for a while in this shady spot near the river. It's a beautiful afternoon. I was just enjoying the cool water on my feet in the sunshine and peace and quiet. After about an hour, I decided to move up the river a bit, try a little deeper pool with less current. I grabbed my stuff, my backpack with my mountain pistol in there, a fishing pole, and start making my way up the bank. There were some big trees down in the river and piles of rocks. I had to cut off a little bit into the woods to make my way. I found where the trail continued on across the river, and a few years the river had been easier to cross. But it didn't look like anyone had been on that trail in a while. It was really overgrown, kind of eerie. As I was about to take a step from the trailhead and continue up to the river, all of a sudden, the weird feeling washed over me. My hair stood on the back of my neck. I stood stone still and froze in mid-step. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was. That set me off. There was a little wind. It wasn't completely quiet, but I thought I heard a twig snap, that kind of unmistakable, heavy-footed, crisp pop that doesn't come from squirrels, birds, or the wind. Then my thoughts raced, thinking, you need to turn around and go back down the river and get across the river to your dirt bike. Do it calmly, do it quickly, do it now. I never had my thoughts pull me like that. They were literally pulling me away from that spot. I took a step back and quietly, calmly made my way backward over the rock bank. I didn't stop to take my shoes off to wade the water, clambered up the opposite bank, and made my way to the dirt bike. As I was pulling my helmet on, sitting on the bike, getting ready to kick it, when I decided to look at the bank across the river. What had made me leave so quickly? Was I overreacting? Then I saw it standing there across the river, not 10 feet from where I had been by the trailhead. It was huge, hulking, muscular, dark brown, with uneven hair all over, probably 8 feet tall at the shoulders, with the head raised and peering in my direction. I had never encountered a Sasquatch, but this was indeed one of the infamous creatures. It soon made its way down the river. I quickly made my way back in the direction I had come from. I was in its territory, and I got its message. Today's fourth terrifying experience. I was traveling with my mom on Highway 22 between Panama City, Florida, Bay County. It was around 7:15, maybe 7:30, July 2007. We had just gone to the bank and were heading home, going eastbound, about 55, talking. We rolled the windows down. It was a sunny day. We were in the car on that stretch of road. There was 5 to 10 acres of farmland, a big line of pine trees on both sides. We saw what we assumed was a dog in the reed grass. It was black, and I could see its hind end initially. It was walking through the grass, not running. As I slowed down, the creature, which was 150 yards away, suddenly jumped in the middle of the road. It was on all fours and appeared to be a very large black panther. I stopped the car, and my mom and I just stared at this creature as suddenly it rose on its feet. It just stood up, and it was big. It was big, and it stood there facing us. We were in a Chevy, Colorado, and it was facing us. I'm guessing it might be, I'm going to say 9 to 10 feet tall. That would be the height. That would be my guesstimate, maybe. I was just confused and shocked while my mom in the passenger seat began screaming out in fright. It had a large head, though it wasn't overly proportionate to the size of its body. Cat ears, cat nose, greenish-gray colored eyes, a wide chest with long hands with pads on the inside, and huge razor-like claws, muscular but not hulking arms, cat-like legs with large feet. It almost looked like 4 feet, not with 2. They were so big, and thick, shiny coat, a small tail with a curl or a ball at the end. At no point did it open its mouth, so I didn't see its teeth. I was certain that this was a male. I thought it was capable of great speed as well. The creature wasn't aggressive at all. It merely stared at us, as if to say, "What are you doing here?" The creature eventually turned and walked off into the field, eventually disappearing. It was odd seeing it walk on its hind legs. Seemed to flow. The entire sighting lasted maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Afterward, my mom, who's in her 70s, told me that she felt great fear and thought that the creature was going to eat us alive. I didn't feel any fear whatsoever. I was more confused and wondering why the creature was allowing us to see it. I had gone up and down that road many times, but I've never seen it again. I eventually moved away from that area, and not because of this creature. And tonight's final terrifying experience. A few years back, I went camping with 2 buddies in the mountains near Lake Tahoe. We hiked about 2 hours with our packs to a small lake and set up camp. All was normal during the day. I made some hot dogs, beans, and then we stayed up till dark to watch the stars. Once it was dark out, we hiked to the top of this large boulder to get a vantage point to see the stars over the trees. I recall that there was no moon out that night because we could see the stars so clearly due to the limited ambient light. And we were pretty far out, so there is no background noise or lights from humans. Once our eyes adjusted, after about a half an hour or so, we could see the stars and even some satellites moving slowly in the sky. So after we were done stargazing, we head down to our tents set up right at the lake. We had 2 two-person tents for the 3 of us. My 2 friends shared one tent, and I was alone in the other tent. We set up the tents right next to each other on a flat spot. I fell asleep pretty easily because I was tired from hiking and exploring all day, and because it was dark. I like sleeping in the dark. However, at around 3 or 4 in the morning, I woke up to rustling outside of my tent. In a half-asleep daze, I'm not sure if it was just the wind or something. I kept listening, and I realized that it was something brushing against my tent, and it sounded like an animal pushing its nose against the tent fabric and smelling. This sound is coming from the side of the tent right next to my head, so I can hear it super clearly. At this point, my heart is racing, and I am lying frozen in my sleeping bag, hoping that whatever is outside will leave my tent alone. I think about calling out to my friends in their tent, but I don't want to startle or anger whatever's outside, so I decide to just lie there, hoping it'll leave. My mind was going through every possibility, then finally realized what it was. When we had set up our tents earlier, there wasn't much flat space, so we placed our tents very close to each other. Evidently, they were so close that my friend was moving his feet in the sleeping bag. They brushed against my tent, which was right near my head. So, all along, it was my friend's feet moving around, and there was no animal or person outside. Phew. However, the weird stuff doesn't stop, and I only realized that the next part was weird once we had left the next day and gone home. As I lied in my tent and tried to slow my heart after realizing the rustling sound was my friend, I was looking at shadows of the trees on the walls of my tent. They reminded me of a time when I was a kid, when the car would slowly drive down your street and the headlights through the blinds would cast shadows that slowly drew across your ceiling. At the time, it made sense to me, and I thought it was just like when I was a kid, considering that I had just thought a creature was outside my tent. This seemed like nothing. However, as I mentioned earlier, it was dark and moonless. So, what could that light have been? It was very slow-drawing light and had shadows of the trees moving across the tent wall for 5 minutes. We are far from civilization, so there's no way it was a car or a flashlight from a midnight hiker because the light was so steady and slow moving. Could it have been a flare in the sky or a comet streaking across the dark sky. I still don't know what it was, and I only ever realized it after I had gotten home and left the campsite.
You're looking at that little black spot in the middle. Wait for it to move. It slinks over some rocks. The original poster said this was in Phoenix Mountain Preserve near Cave Creek Road in Peoria. They had one question. What is this thing? Comments on Reddit went from house cat to jaguar to chupacabra to, well, of course, it went to aliens eventually. We showed the video to a team from Arizona Game and Fish and Southwest Wildlife Conservation Center.
That's pretty far. It looks pretty far away.
I don't think it's a domestic cat, but
You don't think it's a cat?
not a domestic cat.
They were just as baffled as everyone else. In the end, it was easier to figure out what this thing is not.
It's clearly not a mountain lion or a bobcat. We have ocelots, rarely. It's not an ocelot, they're a spotted cat. And then bobcats, which are spotted.
It's probably not a bear, not with a tail like that. Jaguars, we've only ever seen a handful of them over 30 years, and all of them are down by the Mexican border.
All right, folks, there you have it. Today's bonus. I do hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is treated with the respect that we all deserve, and I do appreciate it. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about. It may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.